Tonight, calls for the TTC to better protect its workers.
We are beaten up on a daily basis, and it's exhausting.
We speak to a TTC bus driver about the dangers of working during the pandemic after one of his female colleagues was assaulted for allegedly asking two passengers to wear masks. Plus,
could we, increase by about 50% our capacity in these mass vaccination clinics? I absolutely think we could.
Ontario's vaccine supply is ramping up, but is the province capable of administering the doses into arms at the same rate? We look into the numbers, and
we're still hoping that we will receive this grant.
Many small business owners say they are still waiting for support from the province's small business grant program months after it was first introduced. Good evening, I'm Kelda Yoon. Calls are growing for the TTC to do more to protect workers. The union representing its workers says their drivers should be able to refuse unmasked riders as well as limit the number of people on their vehicles. These calls coming after a recent violent assault on a female bus driver. Our Jessica Ng reports.
We are beaten up on a daily basis, and it's exhausting.
We granted this bus driver anonymity because he's afraid he'll lose his job for speaking out against the TTC. He says the transit agency needs to step up its protection of employees after a female bus driver was assaulted Sunday night, allegedly because she asked two passengers to wear masks.
They're challenging the system, and they challenge us as operators because, unfortunately, the city and the commission has made it so people are aware that there is nothing we can say.
The Transit Commission's webpage says masks are mandatory for passengers, then goes on to say the TTC will not be enforcing the use of masks or face coverings. A TTC spokesperson says they don't want drivers enforcing rules around masking for safety reasons. The union says someone has to.
Whether it's fare enforcement officers, whether it's special constables, we need more employees so frontline staff feel protected.
The Transit Commission insists driver incidents have not increased during the pandemic and that numbers are stable. Carlos Santos disagrees.
There's been about a 12% increase just from September until December. There's at least one or two of our transit workers are assaulted every day.
They're also pushing for protections like re-implementing rear door boarding, stopping cash fares, and the ability to refuse riders on packed vehicles. The bus driver says most other employees he speaks to agree their jobs have drastically changed during the pandemic, with limited interactions unless it's a confrontation.
How have your perceptions of the job changed?
It is far more stressful, far more challenging than I ever imagined. And I think consequentially, having all these restrictions and these expectations, more from our employer than actually the public, has made it not so attractive.
The two suspects in Sunday's assault, a 26-year-old male and a 25-year-old female, were due in court today, facing charges of assault, mischief, and theft under $5,000. Jessica Ng, CBC News, Toronto.
Toronto Public Health has issued a new order requiring schools and other educational settings to limit in-person attendance for most purposes, not just classes, in an effort to reduce the spread of COVID-19. TPS says the order is meant to supplement the provincially mandated school closures and will take effect on Monday. The agency says the new rule applies to all educational settings, not just those designated as schools or private schools under the Education Act. The order says in-person attendance by students is restricted as much as possible, regardless of whether it's for teaching or other instruction. Now, there are some exceptions, such as daycare services and instruction for children with special needs. Health officials were asked today about the possibility of students heading back into the classroom this spring.
We are very actively working with the Ministry of Education and with local public health units to look at the statistics. How many cases are there? What's the transmission? What is the capacity of the hospitals? All those various factors will go into a decision around when schools can open.
Dr. Yaffe added that officials are wary of opening schools too soon and then having to close them again, though she said schools will be the first thing to reopen once it's deemed safe to do so. Starting today, anyone over the age of 18 in Peel is eligible to book an appointment for a vaccine at any of the region's mass vaccination centers.
I think it's a good idea. It's a hotspot, right? So you kind of want to start here and then spread out.
I think it's really important. Peel has a lot of people that are at risk because of their work environment.
Most Peel residents aged 18 to 44 were already eligible to get vaccinated because they lived in hotspots. But the decision to expand eligibility to all adults in Peel clears the way for an additional 50,000 people to book their appointments. The goal now is to get a first dose to 75% of adults in the Peel region by the end of this month. Ontario set a daily vaccination record yesterday, administering more than 140,000 shots. And with more than 4 million doses expected to arrive by the end of this month, the province's vaccine campaign is ramping up fast. But does it have the capability to administer the doses as quickly as they are arriving? Angelina King takes a look.
We could be doing well over 500,000 doses a day.
That's Dr. David Williams at a news conference 3 weeks ago. CBC Toronto wanted to find out if that's possible. So we contacted all 34 public health units and the Pharmacy Association to find out the maximum number of shots they could give a day if supply wasn't an issue. Once added up, the number is closer to 373,000, though it is an estimate because there is some inconsistent data. The Ministry of Health didn't provide clarity on where 500,000 came from. Dr. Isaac Bogosh, a member of Ontario's Vaccine Task Force, says he can't comment on it
because I don't know where that number came from.
He says 150,000 per day is a more realistic target.
That's basically equivalent to when the United States was vaccinating at a very fast pace.
Dr. Bogosh says in order to get there, several factors must work together, including having more supply and expanding the role of pharmacies and family doctors.
If all the vaccines arrived, 500,000 a day arrived today, no, absolutely not. We could not deliver that.
Although Dr. Barry Pecos, who's helped administer vaccines, says it's possible to hit that target with the right resources and infrastructure, but that's just not in place in Ontario. He says a more user-friendly booking system, better communication from the province, and a more centralized approach would help.
We don't have and have never had a health system, that actually connects hospitals, primary care, specialty care, labs, pharmacies, and that's a barrier that we're not going to be able to get over during this pandemic, but is absolutely something we need to think about.
Jen Quinlan helped run the province's largest hotspot pop-up clinic last month in Thorncliffe Park, where 3,000 people got their first dose.
That took dozens of community health ambassadors, dozens of clinicians, and dozens of administrators.
She says to do even more, pop-ups would need more staff and suggests allowing other trained healthcare professionals to administer vaccines. She says in some instances, those that would be at a pop-up are instead helping in hospitals where the situation is dire.
It's definitely a shuffle between the priorities.
Quinlan says soon Ontario will hit a ceiling. Everyone who's eager to get vaccinated will be able to book. Then the focus will have to turn to addressing hesitancy and those who fell through the cracks. Angelina King, CBC News, Toronto.
Colette Kennedy joins us now with a first look at the forecast. And Colette, temperature is still a bit cool, but really nice to see some sunshine today.
Yeah, I think that was so great, Kelda. Good for the soul, right? We did have a cool start, though. 2 degrees we fell to overnight last night. It won't be as cool tonight because of that system working its way through. But one area with the frost advisory again tonight, that would be here on Perth. Most of the action is a little further south. And by action, I mean the cloud cover, which kind of acts like a blanket, but more importantly, the rainfall. So you see some of that heavier rain that moves into the Niagara region and through the GTA. So not just as it comes in overnight tonight, it lingers into tomorrow morning. So you need the umbrella for the first part of the day, but into the afternoon, just some isolated showers will be left behind, and into the later afternoon, we'll get into some clearing. But also want to point out for southwestern Ontario that into the later afternoon, you do have a chance to see some heavy downpours with some embedded thunderstorms there. So that's your peak. Just looking ahead into Friday, we're going to get to the weekend coming up, but tonight, just know 5 degrees for the low, and then tomorrow, we're looking at a high around 11 degrees with some of that clearing later in the day, Kelda.
Thanks, Colette. The Ontario PC Party is launching a blitz of attack ads targeting the federal Liberals. The ads blame the spread of COVID-19 variants in our province on the Trudeau government's handling of Canada's borders. Our Queen's Park reporter Mike Crawley has this story.
COVID-19 is changing.
The Ontario PC Party paid for this ad.
Mutant COVID variants are flying into Canada from countries like the UK, South Africa, Brazil, and India.
The ad attempts to place the blame for Ontario's third wave on the federal Liberal government, and in particular, on the Prime Minister.
Trudeau didn't close the borders when the pandemic started. He didn't close the borders when it got worse.
The ad does not mention that foreigners have been barred from non-essential travel to Canada since March of last year. There are exemptions for family members of Canadian citizens and such things as funerals. The bulk of international arrivals at Pearson these days are Canadians with a constitutional right to come home. The Conservatives are hammering away about the borders at every opportunity.
To tighten up our borders until we don't see this tragedy happen in any long-term care.
We also need to protect our borders in a better way.
We need the Prime Ministers to step up and secure our borders.
It's by no means clear that the borders are a major factor driving Ontario's third wave of COVID-19. There were more than 100,000 new cases reported in the province last month. Just 1.2% were a result of travel.
It looks like somebody over in the PC Party thinks they have to do everything they possibly can to change the channel and protect Doug Ford's backside.
So Doug Ford is doing what Conservatives always do. They always go back to the same playbook of trying to divide people and sow seeds of fear and disruption and anxiety.
You know, I guess maybe the next thing they're going to be saying is build a wall.
The PCs deny the ads are xenophobic.
We know that these new variants are not originating in Ontario or in Canada. They're not swimming across the ocean, Mr. Speaker.
Travelers flying to Canada must test negative for COVID before departing. They're also tested on arrival at Pearson. Then they have to quarantine in a government-approved hotel for 3 days or longer if their arrival test shows they're infected. Mike Crawley, CBC News, Toronto.
Ontario's Small Business Support Grant was introduced at the beginning of the year to help small business owners survive the COVID-19 lockdowns. But months later, many who applied for the grant say they are still waiting for the help. Ali Chiasson has more.
As long as we're closed and people can't come in, we're not really doing any business right now. A little bit of online.
Customers haven't been able to try on clothes at Gaspard in over 300 days. That's kind of important when you're shopping for high-end clothes. The owner's situation is pretty dire.
In 2 months, we might be out of business. That's the reality.
They applied for Ontario's Small Business Support Grant as a lifeline.
I applied for that January 16th of 2021, and now I think it's 4 months on, and we're still hoping that we will receive this grant.
When first announced in January, the grant was to provide eligible businesses with one-time funding of between $10,000 and $20,000. Then, when the Ontario budget was presented in March, it included a second round of payments.
As small business, we all speak to each other on the street, and you hear, someone got this, someone got the second amount, and you're like, but what about me? Aren't we kind of the same? So it's frustrating.
Local NDP MPP Jessica Bell asked 14,000 small businesses in the University Rosedale riding and found 85% haven't received their first payment.
When is the Premier going to step up to the plate and finally support the small businesses of this province?
The province responded to our inquiry about this, saying, quote, over 108,000 small businesses have received their first Ontario Small Business Support Grant payment, with over 73,000 businesses receiving their second, for a total of $2.65 billion in support. The statement goes on to say the huge demand has made for some challenges in processing the applications, and that they're, quote, doing everything they can to ensure payments are delivered to eligible businesses as quickly as possible. The Canadian Federation of Independent Business has had issues with the grant program from the beginning.
Look, the maximum grant is $40,000, and restaurants have been closed for over 300 days. That's nowhere near enough to support them to try to make it through to the other side of COVID.
The folks at Gaspard and thousands of others are certainly trying to.
That money, if we end up, receiving it, it just would be it would make it a little bit easier to have a future.
Ali Chiasson, CBC News, Toronto.
Recognition is a key part of healing.
A milestone day for the Tamil community in Ontario. A bill passes in the legislature recognizing a genocide against Tamils in Sri Lanka. We'll have the reaction after the break. Canada is stepping up aid to India as that country battles a catastrophic surge in COVID cases and deaths. A military cargo jet carrying medications, ventilators, and other supplies is scheduled to touch down in New Delhi on Saturday. Canada plans to send a total of 350 ventilators and is working with UNICEF to supply more than 1,400 oxygen concentrators. The supplies are on top of $10 million in cash pledged through the Canadian Red Cross. India is reporting another global daily record of almost 413,000 infections and a new national high of almost 4,000 deaths. Well, those in this city's large Tamil community are calling it a major milestone. A bill was passed in the Ontario legislature today, proclaiming May 12th to May 18th as Tamil Genocide Education Week. Ardalia Ashry has more.
For many members of the GTA's Tamil community, today was a historic moment at Queen's Park.
Recognition is a key part of healing.
Vijay Thanagasalam, MPP for Scarborough Rouge Park, was at Queen's Park today, where the bill recognizing the Tamil genocide was passed.
This bill is to educate our future generation about the impacts of genocide so that we can say collectively, never again.
The bill declares the week of May 12th to May 18th every year as Tamil Genocide Education Week, recognizing the thousands of Sri Lankan Tamils killed in the country's civil war, a quarter century of violence that ended on May 18th, 2009. More than 100,000 Tamils live in Ontario, with Toronto being home to one of the largest Tamil diasporas in the world. Gajani Baskanathan is the president of the Canadian Tamil Youth Alliance, which has been advocating since 2019 to have this bill passed. She says today is a milestone.
Every single youth in Ontario today are proud that we have a safe space going forward to talk about Tamil genocide and also to talk about identity.
She says as a Tamil Canadian, she yearned for more supports from teachers growing up.
They weren't well equipped to talk about it, right? Because when it comes to trauma and like understanding what atrocities happened to us at that time, teachers had to be equipped for that. So having a bill like this, where we're recognizing Tamil genocide, it makes it easier for Tamil students to kind of talk about the trauma that happened.
The Youth Alliance launched an online Tamil museum in 2012, compiling historical information and images to tell the story of the Tamil genocide. They're hoping it continues to grow.
Because when we start talking about these things, we're also helping other communities heal as well, because we're opening up a safe space for them to share.
Dahlia Ashry, CBC News, Toronto.
A quick shot by Muzzin, rebound, score! John Tavares!
The Leafs taking on the Montreal Canadiens at home tonight. A skip to the second period. The Leafs are up 4-0 when Montreal finally gets on the board. They would get within 2, but Austin Matthews scores his league-leading 40th goal of the season in the third to wrap this one up. Leafs win 5-3.
1-1 and a swing and a high fly ball, well hit, left field, and it's gone.
And the Jays in Oakland for an afternoon game. Toronto taking the lead in top of third. Randall Grichuk scoring this 3-run homer. Oakland would reclaim the lead in the bottom of the inning, but Toronto would go on to score 7 more runs. They win this one 10-4. The Jays now fly to Houston for a 3-game series against the Astros, kicking off tomorrow night. Partly cloudy this evening with some light rain developing overnight. Temperature is a bit milder than previous nights. Currently, it's about 11 degrees in downtown Toronto. Let's go back to Colette now with a look at your extended forecast. And Colette, nice to see the sun out earlier, but some clouds moving in tonight, and we'll be seeing some showers come through.
Yeah, we're getting into some wet conditions, and it's not just overnight, it lingers into tomorrow morning, so everyone have your umbrella handy. You'll see how it's tracking through. The Niagara region seeing a little more of this system than we do, but along the northern shore of Lake Ontario getting that impact too. So we have those showers. We get into some clearing late afternoon, the sun coming back, but a few isolated showers still possible. And hey, for the weekend, Sunday, I know I don't need to remind you, Mother's Day, and things are looking pretty good with our forecast then. Daytime temperatures, this was at 6 a.m. this morning. Some cool readings at that point, just above freezing in many cases. Into the afternoon with that sun, though, we really did okay in Toronto, up to 13 degrees. So tonight, this is what's working its way in. Some of the heavier rain towards St. Catharines, Niagara Falls area, and then it's more kind of skimming across the GTA. If that tracks a little further north, we'll get into more significant rainfall. Otherwise, it's just these kind of scattered showers. Tomorrow, a few isolated ones left behind, but basically, we're going to get some late afternoon clearing and have the sun coming back. Also late afternoon, though, southwestern Ontario, a few thunderstorms certainly possible, so we could have a few heavy downpours there. Early Saturday, there's some wet conditions, and then primarily we dry up. I mean, a few spots where you could still see a sprinkle or two. It's looking not too bad. The next system is going to roll in Sunday, but this is 7 a.m. You do okay central and eastern portions for the day, and likely you should stay dry. Let's hope until the afternoon for Mother's Day there in southwestern Ontario. Temperatures tonight with a slight chance that you could have the thunderstorm working its way through. Tomorrow afternoon, though, is really when we'll see that enhanced risk here of some pop-ups coming back at you. And tonight, not as cold as it was last night for the Golden Horseshoe. These are what the readings look like with wet weather coming in. And because we get kind of a slower start tomorrow, it does mean the temperatures are going to likely be a little bit, just a couple degrees cooler than today. But again, we should be around 17 degrees for a daytime high, and not seeing that on my 5-day forecast at all. But still, once we get some drier conditions and that sun, I don't think we'll have too much trouble with where we will be with those temperatures next week, Hilda.
Thanks, Colette.
The weather is brought to you by Trane, the most reliable heating and cooling brand. We test, so it runs. It's hard to stop a train.
Finally tonight, a very well-traveled bottle of French wine is up for sale. The 2000 vintage red from Bordeaux spent 14 months maturing aboard the International Space Station. The bottle is one of 12 that were sent into orbit, traveling about 300 million kilometers. It is being sold in a package that includes a special handmade case, a decanter, glasses, a bottle of the same wine that did not go into space, and a corkscrew made from a meteorite. It's being offered by Christie's auction house and is expected to sell for about $1 million US. The money will go towards funding future space missions. And that is our show for you tonight. Thank you so much for watching. Chris Glover has your next local newscast tomorrow at 6. I will see you back here tomorrow night at 11. Good night.